Hi there, Phil the Practical Gardener again. This particular tip is about selecting plants to suit the situations that you actually have in your garden. And any domestic garden has actually got a range of different microclimates with varying sun, shade, shelter, soil conditions and such like. So that's what we're going to look at. The issues I'm going to look at include cold and then frost, which is not necessarily the same thing, and then the other side, which is sun and heat. Also looking at soil conditions, water availability, drought, and then finishing on shade. And this particular area has actually been a bit of a problem child for me. It's actually in the coolest, shadiest part of my property. And the area that I'm standing on is only actually a very small area. I can't have anything large in front of the fence, which was actually very ugly. So the project I've finally come up with very recently actually was to put a brushwood barrier over the fence and then hang tree fern trunks on it, and then I've got these staghorn ferns from Australia and they're perfectly happy in this cool shady situation. I only did it a few weeks ago and I think they're going to come on fabulously. They're very well suited. They're not going to take up any room over my seating area that's right here. They're going to be quite a spectacle, I think, in years to come. I'm really looking forward to it. Firstly, looking at the cold. Now every property has got cold areas, partly because they are shaded, also perhaps because they're in a drafty area, which is a tunnel between different buildings, and therefore it attracts every breeze. You have to think about what sort of plants might be suited for there. On the other hand, even in zones which are actually quite cool, as I am in fact here, you will always have warm spots. So close to where I'm filming here, there is a fence which is facing directly into the midday and afternoon sun, and the fence behind it shelters the plants from the wind chill that would come in areas such as this one here. And so I've been able to put citrus trees here, which are actually quite marginal in my area, which have been able to grow and fruit very, very well, because they're getting full sun, they're protected from the breeze, and they're getting reflected heat from the fence. So it's absolutely ideal. So I've been able to choose the plants to suit the microclimate that I've got. Next, frost. And of course frost can be very devastating to more tender plants. And I am in an area here which is not very prone to frost, but sometimes I do get them on exposed open areas. So what I do is, if I have a sensitive plant, I put it in an area that is sheltered from the frost. For instance, right now, which is late winter, I've got early potatoes growing in an area which is in the sun, but is right up under my house, so the house protects that area from the frosts. Likewise, this area here, the ferns that I'm growing, which are staghorn ferns from Queensland and Australia, would be sensitive to frost. However, they're protected by the fence and by the canopy of tree ferns growing over the top. So in other words, you can have an area in your garden which is exposed to the frost, and also areas that are protected, and you can take benefit from that. For me, another area is my terrace, where I can grow sensitive plants and they are very well protected. Next, we'll look at exposure to sunlight. And there are actually many plants that actually require full exposure to sunlight. This includes fruit, and all of my fruit trees are growing on sunny areas. I talked about citrus, but I've also got plum, persimmon, apple, feijoa, a range of other fruits, all of them in high sun areas. The same goes for my vegetables. So most of my vegetables, onions, which I actually just planted the other day, potatoes, tomatoes, capsicums, beetroot and such like, are all grown in full sun. So I make full value from the areas that are most exposed to the sun. Having said that, I have got shade areas where I do grow salad greens. You can actually take advantage of shade areas for cropping to some extent. In the front part of my property, I have ornamental gardens, and again, it's a very, very sunny spot. We have a high level of sun intensity where I'm living, and so I grow a lot of succulent plants there. Aloes and bescornerias and other plants which come from Mexico and other sorts of climates are very well suited to that area. Then we'll discuss water availability. Normally quite high quality water is available in suburban areas through different water authorities. However, sometimes it is quite limited in quantity, or else it might be metered and quite expensive. So therefore I think we should conserve water as much as possible in our garden. in my front garden, an area which is very prone to getting dry because it's exposed to both the sun and the wind, I have got the plants I mentioned a moment ago, the aloes and the besconerias, and other plants which don't actually need any additional water whatsoever. On the other hand, plants that require quite a high amount of water, such as my vegetables, I actually put them all in the same area so that I'm not wasting my water. All of the water I'm putting on is going on to plants that have a related requirement for a high amount of water. The final topic I'm going to discuss is shade. And I mentioned before, every property has got some degree of shade. I certainly have got a number of different zones which have that issue, and I think it can be a bit of a challenge to grow plants. There are quite a lot of ornamental plants that you can select that will grow quite happily in the shade. I mentioned that this area here, I'm growing tree ferns and these staghorn ferns, and they're going to be very well suited here because they would burn if they were in full sun, or as I mentioned before, exposed to the frost. So you can take advantage of areas which are shady to actually create some quite magnificent spectacles. And of course, in summer, this area, which is shaded and cool, is an ideal place for me to put out my hammock and enjoy a nice cool beer. Now, this is one of a series of topics that I'm going to be producing regarding the placement of plants, particularly ornamental plants in your garden. So make sure that you are subscribing to my channel and also like this tip so you'll see the further ones as they become available. I have now got over 100 tips available in a full range of playlists that you can see here. These also are reflected in my recent book, Down to Earth Gardening, which is available in the sites which I've linked down below in the comments section. And so finally, of course, thank you very much for watching this through to the end.